loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
So last week we started a conversation where it was really about an individual sharing his journey with us about how living his truth has impacted his relationships. Because, specifically in our Jamaican society, which to some extent is somewhat homophobic, it has not been an easy. He's been sharing his journey with us. This is Nickoy Wilson. He is a policy and advocacy officer with the Equality for All Foundation in Jamaica. Welcome, Nickoy, and let's continue the conversation. So I remember one of the things that because initially the topic was how has it negatively or positively impacted your relationships, the fact that you've decided to live your truth. And I remember that you said you haven't had any negative, or if so, it's in the
Right.
minority. So let's get straight into that. Why then would you say that it's been mostly positive rather than negative in terms of your relationships? And we can probably split it in terms of your personal and your professional relationships.
All right. So for personal relationships, my friends, would have already told them.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have already been aware. So any any publication or publicity that I'd get from being open, they would
Mm-hmm.
have already known that I was. So they would
Okay.
have already, I guess, somewhat prepared for whatever would come.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, nothing has happened to any of my friends, thank God, because of my decision to be out.
Okay.
So personally, and then as it relates to the relationship with my family as well, as I was saying, I'm close to very few members of them, members of my family, and then
Mm-hmm.
also as it is with my sister, many of the relationships don't raise to that level. In fact, I think perhaps because I've made posts on Facebook, so the family probably talk about it and then probably okay, whatever, because it's not as if I would be the first LGBT person in the family.
Okay.
So the family already know, and they would be like probably it's a hush hush topic then,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. So maybe that's the approach that they have taken as to why I would not have heard anything or it being an issue. Or so in fact, even the other day when I messaged family members, I was like, yeah, the message was basically, oh yes, live your life, live your truth. That was literally what they sent me. And I was like, thank you, and I was kind of surprised by it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happened. As it relates to my professional life, it has actually opened my eyes and I think it's probably because I'm living in Kingston. So you definitely you'll have a lot of homophobic people in Kingston. We can't say we don't, we do. However, I think the people I have to interact with would fall into the population that aren't necessarily homophobic or will have reason not to be openly homophobic. So,
Okay.
so that could be a part of it as well. And I don't want to discount the fact that maybe many of them having studied overseas or having gained a lot of life experience recognizes that okay, these people exist and you have to work with them, and that's that and that. Because even in my work environment, with many of us there, because not all persons at my organization are LGBT people, but even
Okay.
there, the question of sexuality doesn't come up. Whether you're gay, straight, it doesn't come up. We just have conversations around relationship, sex, and whatever else that comes up. Your sexuality it no longer becomes an issue in that way.
Okay.
And I think that's why then I think the people who I'm interacting with, as I'm saying, they have recognized that okay, if you know of somebody being gay, it's not like that they're gonna be coming to push arguments with you, because there are people who also want to earn money. There are people who are also professional, and they just want to live undisturbed. That sort of thing. So I think that's why, and especially journalism, I think would have also helped. So because they would have known me from before, I think that would have also helped them to not necessarily be hands off. Because even the other day I got a call, I answered, And I was a little, because even to this day, and that's why I'm saying this coming out thing is a constant process. Even to this day, it's hard for me to say, oh, hey, I work at JFlag to any and anybody. Because it almost feels as if, oh God, I'm going to be telling them that I'm gay again. Like it's that sort of thing. And it does bring with it some level of mental stress, having to do that. But it's something that, I guess I have to do. I can't avoid it, so I have to accept it, but it doesn't make it less difficult. It's definitely difficult. I got the call and she was like, I'm saying, oh no, I'm no longer a gleaner. And so she's like, where and I was like, I'm saying, I said soft, I'm saying, I'm at JFlag, I'm at Policy and Advocacy. And she said, where? I'm saying, J. And then the conversation just flowed after that. A few months ago, I got another call. This lady sends me Bible messages almost every day. And like, I was talking to her, so she called me and I was talking to her. And I eventually told her. And then she was like, oh, you know this person? And I was like, oh, wow, look at that. So it has really been a learning experience. It has really been eye-opening because I've now recognized that not everyone is homophobic, and that more of us are tolerant than we make it out to be. So yes, there exist pockets of homophobia, but overwhelmingly, I'd say that, especially generally, we are moving towards a place of more tolerance than anything else.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
For all your events, such as educational forums, workshops, book launches, weddings, and more, contact Noreen Daly, the ultimate MC and event host. Visit NoreenDaly.com or follow her on Instagram at NoreenDailyJam. Noreen Daly, creating long-lasting memories.
It's interesting you said that, because one thing that I've actually said in my classes, I think Jamaicans are selectively homophobic. And I'll tell you why I say that. I find that they're more open to females with females than they are with males. And I've said it in my class, and anytime I say people snicker, and I'm like, but it's actually true. It's actually true. I'm not sure why that is.
There's a colonial aspect to it, because even our laws now, and it's hard for me not to go into this because it's my job. Even our laws now, section 76, 77, and 78 or 79 of the Offenses Against the Persons Act, it only criminalizes male on male, same sex, that sort of relationship, that sort of sexual relationship, and whatever else. That is what it criminalizes. There's no mention of females in it. So from early on, the law would have only criminalized male on male, basically intimacy, not other types. So that would have also helped. And then I suppose, I guess it's a sort of, also patriarchy, the patriarchal view that women are here to serve. So women, men seeing two women together is almost as if, oh yes, two of them are there to serve him. So it's not a big deal, whatever they do to each other, as long as they're there to serve him, or do things to his or her pleasure. Because that's usually where it ends up. It's more about the pleasure that they get from it. They don't get pleasure from seeing two men together, so that's why they're going to issue it.
True. We're in a society, and specifically Jamaica, where yes, we just spoke about the fact that people are becoming more tolerant. But you work with an organization, and part of the core of this podcast is to really help people to have better relationships. And in having people have better relationships, you have to then be more tolerant of each other and be more open, even if it is that you don't necessarily agree with what somebody is doing and how they're living their life. Now, from where you sit, Nickoy, what do you think can be done to build this level of tolerance in the Jamaican society in particular, because that is where we live?
Whew. Very good question. The simplest I can say is sensitization. Coming up with creative ways to sensitize the public will always be the challenge. Reaching people where they are will always be the challenge. But it's really through sensitization. It's really through people getting the knowledge and understanding why people are the way they are, and then recognizing too that you ought to respect individuals regardless of how they decide to live their life. Because I mean, beyond the whole issue of homophobia here, you recognize. So, for example, there's a culture of impunity where you do things that you know they're not getting punished. There is a culture of not necessarily caring for the environment, so there these are other issues that I
Mm-hmm.
think that really affect how far we can go in advocacy, because people are not even
Mm.
thinking about themselves. They're throwing garbage wherever they want. They're not thinking that, oh, when I throw the garbage here, the place I go flood out. They're not thinking about that. So
Right.
it's really about kind of having people have a sense of pride and dignity in themselves to recognize that other people deserve that.
As we're wrapping up, you probably would have said it earlier, but because this hits close to home, because I have some young people around me who I know are struggling. So if there's somebody who's listening right now, Nicole, and they're saying, you got to that point, you obviously had the support. If I say to my mom, she's gonna run me out of the house, my family, they'll diss me, and I'm still not yet dependent.
Mhm.
Independent, not dependent, right?
Right,
Independent.
independent. Mhm.
What would be your response to that person?
Wow, very, very difficult question to answer because everyone's circumstances are
Mm-hmm.
is different. Uh, but 3 word, it gets better.
Okay.
Um, Two, they should not feel pressured into coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And it always should be done with careful consideration for all that will be affected.
Okay.
And also, I don't think you should, if you're in a position now, right? You're dependent on your parents, you're dependent on a
Mm-hmm.
guardian.
Mm-hmm.
However, you realize that okay, in the next 2 or so years you can be independent, and then at that point you probably can. Then I would say to wait. I know it's a
Okay.
struggle, but you really have to analyze your situation and recognize what's best for you. That's the sort of thing that you have to do. That's really the sort of thing that you have to do. But it definitely gets better. I am working. JFlag is working to make things better for LGBT Jamaicans here. It's a slow process, but it's a process that we're actively working on. We have been working for the past 20 21 years on it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it won't change overnight. But I think that especially older Jamaicans who are tolerant and who can appreciate other people's rights will recognize that Jamaica has come a far way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that's the hope that I would tell them to hold on to, that it will get better.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Does your business lack branding? Having difficulty realizing your vision? Look no further. Splinth Brand Design Consultancy specializes in developing personal and business brands. Services include strategic management, website creation, social media branding, and more. Visit them online at www.wearesplint.com. Splinth, the brand you need to succeed.
Speaking as somebody who's struggling, so I grew up in the church. I've been pretty active in the church, but I recognize that I struggle with these feelings, and I feel that if it is that I decide that yes, I want to live my truth and come out, my church family will shun me, and I will not be able to be as active in church when this is something I actually enjoy doing in terms of being active in church. What would be your response to that?
Wow. At the end of the day, it has to be a balance. Well, you have to weigh things against each other. You have to decide if living your truth in that way is going to bring greater value to your life than being active in the church.
Okay.
Um, and I think when you are able to do that, then you would be able to move forward, because then you'd consider, okay, the reaction of the church, probably the reaction of your parents, whether or not taking decision to be outside of that, how else will it affect your life?
Hmm.
But also beyond those considerations, I think I can't ask this of everyone,
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, if you're in a position to be out and to impact your space, it's something that I think you should be able to do. Because that's another thing. We have to be able to be visible in spaces so that people can say, oh, these people exist and that this is not something that's abnormal.
Yeah.
But I think the specific to your question is very hard to answer because I really think that in terms of religion and what we think about religion and, and God generally, it's very hard to disabuse yourself from that. And as I said earlier, it's really about weighing one thing against the other. Because for me, being in church does not outweigh me wanting to live my truth.
Okay.
In that way. Because I mean, that thing too, because being in church could be very fulfilling for some people, when compared to being, out and proud. And so it's really on that, that's a yardstick I would use to determine whether or not staying in church is worth it. Or I guess there's another conversation too about whether or not switching denominations, going to a denomination that may be more tolerant. That's also a conversation that would come up because then I think people will go into the conversation of whether or not, moving to this denomination is the right thing. Is this denomination teaching the right thing? So those questions also come up. So it's a lot. It is a lot to think about. It's really a lot to think about.
You said a lot, and for those who would stay to the end of this conversation, because I anticipate that some people will start listening to this and they will stop and probably come back to it at another time, or maybe don't even finish listening to it. But for those who would stay to the end, Nickoy, to hear what all of this was about, if they've been very cynical and very, very close-minded, what's the one thing that you'd want to say to them about the fact that you living your truth, you're okay with your relationships and you have the support? What is the one thing you'd want to leave with our listeners?
Well, the one thing I want to leave is that I really hope that as they grow, as they progress through life, that they will come to the realization that we're all human, we're all created equally. And if we are to live in a world where respect prevails, where people can feel as if they can make the most of their lives, then it has to be with the recognition that each and every person, by virtue of being human, has those same rights as they do. And so it has to be, we really just have to come to the point where we recognize the humanity in people and recognize that humanity deserves respect. That is it. That's really it.
Thank you so much, Nickoy. We've opened the door for other conversations, which I am sure we will have. Thank you so much.
No problem.
This was Make It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Until next time.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.